the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. And after a disappointing game by the Philadelphia Union last Wednesday in Toronto, the Union bounced back with a 4-1 victory over rivals New York Red Bulls. And that sees your Philadelphia Union now sit in fourth place still in the Eastern Conference. But the big news for the Union over the weekend was Cincinnati surprisingly lost at home to Orlando City. The Union, remember, still have a game in hand on Cincinnati, still have yet to face Cincinnati. That's the game coming up on September 16th. Orlando City has now jumped ahead of the Union with 47 points, but they also have played an extra game than the Union. And now things are starting to get a little bit interesting in the Eastern Conference. I know when you look at the table, Cincinnati is still 11 points up on the Union. But let's say the Union beat Cincinnati. They win that game in hand. Now you're only 5 games back. Cincinnati have lost at home, which nobody thought was going to happen. They've made TQL Stadium a fortress, and that did not affect Orlando City at all. They scrap away a 1-0 victory and make things just a tad more interesting in the Eastern Conference. 7 and 8 games for most teams in the East to be played. And let's face it, and I don't want to jinx anything. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but Cincinnati have never been in this position before. The closer we get into playoffs, they've never had to just take care of business and see it through and win a Supporters' Shield and win first place in the East. They've never had to do it. And so you look at the way they've played all season long under Pat Noonan, you would expect them to finish first in the East, but crazier things have happened. I mean, we know that last year from the Union, right? A point away from hosting the MLS Cup final. A point away, tied on points, 67 points with LAFC. But LAFC had the better points per game because they had more wins than the Union. And so something crazy like that happened. And who's to say it doesn't happen this year with Cincinnati? Now, before we get into today's show, I got to give a shout out to Mike, Dave, and Jose from Across the Pitch podcast. Recording this podcast here on a Tuesday evening. Listening to this, I'm sure most of you on your way into work on Wednesday. But I was on Across the Pitch Monday evening, filling in for Mike Barrera. And so I joined Dave Miller and Jose Nunez, and fantastic conversations with those guys. Of course, we talked about the Toronto game a little bit. We talked about the New York Red Bull game like we're going to do here. So I'm going to try my best not to bring up the points and have the same conversation that we had on their podcast, because I want you guys to check out that podcast. A lot of fun with those guys. An hour, 30 minutes. So played a full 90 minutes if that's what you guys are into. You guys have lots of content. So be sure to check out Across the Pitch. Dave and Jose were on this podcast a few weeks ago. Got to get Mike on at some point and support all the local content creators. And I don't know why. I've been saying that the last couple podcast episodes, giving you guys the reminders. But it's true. You know, there's so many of us that do this for free. And I end it Across the Pitch saying the same thing. We don't get paid to do this. We do it for the love of the game, to help grow the Philadelphia Union in the Philadelphia region, obviously, but and beyond. And there's so many quality people. I mean, I gave a shout out to everybody a few weeks ago. And maybe some people are getting annoyed with me just saying, hey, check out blah, blah, blah. Check out this podcast, read this article. But man, you guys have so many options. And it's a great time to be a Philadelphia Union fan. I feel like not a day goes by that there isn't some kind of Philadelphia Union content being produced. And when I look around MLS, not many teams have this much coverage. So we're blessed here. We're blessed here that so many people want to dedicate their time and their money. People are dedicating their money to go travel away to cover this team. To get what? Nothing in return. They're doing it for the love of the game. And if an opportunity presents itself, then of course people are going to be happy. But people are trying to give the best coverage, the coverage that the Union deserve, the coverage that you, the listeners, deserve. And so I just applaud all those people. Support your local content creators. And without them, there would be no coverage, essentially. And of course, we'll always be thankful for your OG writers that have been reporting on the Union for day one, doing a fantastic job, giving coverage for this team. And again, you don't see a lot of that from other MLS teams either. So very, very fortunate here in the Philadelphia market to have so many people creating daily, giving you guys coverage, the best coverage possible for the Philadelphia Union. So be sure to check out Across the Pitch. Every Mondays, I believe they go live, and check out the most recent episode that I was on. Like I said, hopefully I'm not repeating myself from what we talked about on that show. I'm sure I'll repeat myself here and there, but I don't want this whole episode to be exactly what we talked about on Across the Pitch. But without further ado, let's get straight into the news. All right, so only 4 news points I want to talk about. Hopefully we can fly by them. But point number 1 is Orlando City has transferred designated player import Ercan Kara to Samsunspor of Turkey's first division for an undisclosed transfer fee. Kara had 18 goals and provided 5 assists for the Lions, starting 37 of his 53 appearances across all competitions. Of course, last year he won his first trophy with the Lions, lifting the U.S. Open Cup against Sacramento Republic. Only trophy in Orlando City's short history. And here's a player that Orlando City spent not a crazy amount of money on, but still paid a couple $1 million to make him a designated player. And he got beat out by Duncan McGuire, which is no slight on Duncan at all. And I know it probably came off as that. But here's a player that was playing in college with Curtin. And we don't see too many college kids get drafted, and especially right out of the bat, and be successful. And that's exactly what Duncan McGuire has been this season for Orlando City. He's taken that starting role and made it his in Orlando. And good on him. He's been fantastic in his first season in MLS, scoring a total of 8 goals. It's been great for a player that's not costing a lot against a salary, and you have a team that's willing to take a salary off your books and Carr. Of course you're going to accept that. And this isn't the first time that Orlando City's been successful with college players. Daryl DK is another example of that. Chris Mueller, successful when he was at the club, and then eventually got transferred overseas to Scotland. Didn't work out there. Came back in MLS with Chicago Fire. And so they identify college talent very, very well down in Orlando. And that's great that you can identify that talent. but then you also got to produce it, and they're producing it as well. And so, well on Orlando City for scouting well and for developing talent as well as they have in the forward role. And they can move on and forget about their mistake in signing Kara from Austria. And now he gets a fresh shot again over in Europe. And we'll see what Orlando City does come this winter with that open designated player spot. But speaking of designated players, a report came out late last night that the Philadelphia Union have rejected a $7.5 million offer from Greek club Olympiacos, according to Nico Cantor of CBS Sports. The deal also featured add-ons plus a sell-on clause. Now, Julian Carranza does see his contract expire after this season, but he has an option for the 2024 season, which of course the Union are going to pick that up, just like they always do for key players. But now you kind of run into the same situation you're in with Kai Wagner, right? If you don't sell Julian in the winter, come summertime, he's free to talk to whatever club he wants, and he leaves the club then on a free. And here's the Union turning down $7.5 million. A guaranteed $7.5 million. It would have been the most upfront money that the club have received. And you turn that down in hopes of a better offer coming in January, which is possible. It could come, right? I'm not saying it won't. But man, that takes a lot of guts, right? To turn down $7.5 million for a player that's going to have a year left on his contract come January once they pick up that option. I don't know. Would you guys have done it? I know it sucks that the Union are still in their season, and maybe if they weren't, maybe they would have considered transferring Julian to Olympiacos. Maybe the Union could have tried to have worked out a deal and said, you know, we'll accept this offer, but you got to keep Julian on loan until our season's over. Nico never said if that was a part of the deal or not. Nico's the only one reporting this, and I'm not saying Nico is wrong. I think it's interesting that he's the only one reporting it and not Tom Bogert, who has connections everywhere. But man, to turn down $7.5 million, it's a lot of money to turn down. A lot of money. Now, don't forget that when the Union do eventually sell Julian Carranza, because I think they do, a percentage of that fee is going to go back to Inter Miami, and 5% of that fee is going to go to MLS. Because of MLS's rule, all players other than homegrowns, the league takes 5% out of that deal. And so I'm not sure what sell-on percentage that Inter Miami have on Julian Carranza's deal. And maybe when you calculate that sell-on percentage, MLS's fee, maybe this only comes out to be $3-4 million that the Union would see, which then doesn't sound like a lot of money, right? Because you expect that Julian Carranza can go for $10+ million, and that's great that there is a future sell-on clause and add-ons and whatnot. That's great. But this offer obviously wasn't what the Union were looking for. You would expect that more clubs are going to be sniffing around. And if Julian Carranza, who, by the way, has now scored in 2 consecutive games, if he continues to get hot here in the end of the season, consistently scoring goals, setting up his teammates, you would think more teams are going to come in with offers, especially in the January transfer window where teams are fighting relegation. I've said it before in this podcast. Teams get desperate for goal scorers. And so maybe crazy money could be thrown around. Maybe that's what the Union are banking on happening. Because I do think this situation's a little bit different than Kai Wagner. Julian Carranza is younger. He's a striker. We all know producing strikers is the most difficult position in the world to produce. And it's not every day that you find goal scorers. And Julian Carranza isn't constantly scoring, but my argument would be what strikers are. All strikers in the world, Jim talks about it, go through dips in form. But I guarantee you, if Julian Carranza finishes the season hot, scoring in the playoffs, bigger offers, I do feel confident, even though he'll be down to a year left on his contract, which typically teams aren't going to get desperate and spend money, but it's a striker. And if you see an informed striker is available on the market, you're a team that's desperate for goals, you're willing to spend crazy money just to keep you in whatever league, whatever competition you're in. And so this is interesting. This is our first report that we've seen a team offer the Union money for Julian Carranza. The Union turn it down. So this is definitely one to keep an eye out on. And I'll be curious to see what the Union eventually wind up doing with Julian Carranza. And I mentioned Kai Wagner. We'll talk about that here a little bit later. The next bit of news I want to talk about, though, is Maxi Moralez. He has torn his ACL and will miss the remainder of the season for New York City. He had just recently rejoined the club from racing in Argentina and was playing quite well since he's been back for New York City. And after a couple games, now he's tore his ACL, and man, that's a tough injury to come back for, especially a 36-year-old. And you don't like to see any player get injured. But, I feel especially bad for Maxi Moralez, where he left New York City originally to go back home to Argentina because that's how he wanted to end his career. Wasn't getting playing time, wasn't happy living back home at Argentina, reports said. And so New York City said, we'll take you back. And after a couple games, now he's done, and we'll see. Will Maxi Moralez call it a career? I mean, that's kind of harsh, don't you think, to have an injury dictate, well, this is how you go out. You don't get to call the shots on your career anymore. The injury does. So feel bad for Maxi Moralez. Feel bad for a player that's been a staple for that New York City team. And the last bit of news I want to talk about is international duty. Now, of course, the Union have no games going on during this window, but that doesn't stop them from having call-ups. Daniel Gazdag was called up, but because of that injury he suffered against New York Red Bulls, he's not going to go away with Hungary. Jim Curtin said after the fact that he believes both Daniel Gazdag and Mikau are both fine. They're both going to be okay to go against Cincinnati on the 16th. But Jesus Bueno and Jose Martinez have both been called up by Venezuela. Venezuela take on Colombia on September 7th, and then they play Paraguay on September 12th. Andre Blake and Damian Lowe have both been called up by Jamaica. They will face Honduras on September 8th and Haiti September 12th. Olivier Bazo has been called up for Cameroon, and he'll face Burundi on September 12th. And then Ty Baribo, the newest Philadelphia Union member, has been called up by Israel. He will face Romania on September 9th and Belarus on September 12th. And so there is your Philadelphia Union news on call-ups. And let's get straight into this Philadelphia Union and New York Red Bulls game. And this was your typical Union Red Bull game, Lots of fouls, lots of stoppages, a total of 66 when you count the fouls, the throw-ins, the corners. And for sure, the sending off in this game for Sean Nealis of New York Red Bulls, that changed this whole game. That's when the floodgates started to open up for the Union. But we do know that the Union don't particularly play well when they go up a man. And sitting in the press box talking with Peter Andrews, both he and I were like, no, don't send him off. Don't send him off. This is the worst possible news for the Union. They play so bad a man up. And the Union find a way to score 3 goals once they go up a man. Damian Lowe, Carranza, and Daniel Gazdag to finish it off. And you do feel bad for Sean Nearless and the New York Red Bulls, or at least I do, because I think that's a pretty harsh second yellow to give. The referee apparently said after the game that the reason he gave the second yellow was because he was stopping a good attack. And yes, his arm was out. Yes, the ball hit his arm. And by the nature of the law, that is a yellow card. And Nearless gets sent off. And to the Union's credit, they find a way to dig in and beat a team being a man up. We got to see an actual debut from Ty Baribo, who looks pacey, had a really good splitting pass into Quinn Sullivan, who couldn't get on the end of the pass. You know, he was trying to dictate Quinn Sullivan where to run, and he placed that ball exactly where he told Quinn he was playing it, but Quinn couldn't get to the ball. Jeremy Raffanello makes his debut against his former club in the New York Red Bulls. Just a completely different game this than the one we saw at Red Bull Arena. A different game for sure than the one we saw last Wednesday against Toronto. This was a really good showing by the Union. And I think there was a lot of question marks coming into this game. You weren't too sure what Jim was going to do formation-wise with Jesus Bueno, Jose Martinez, and Leon Flock out. And Leon Flock, by the way, is probably going to miss the rest of the season as he'll likely need surgery on his hernia. Jim Curtin said during his midweek press conference. Jim mentioned that this is something that was bothering Leon all season. He's getting shots and he's playing through the pain. But now the pain's at a point where it's too much for him, and he had to come out early in that Toronto game. And that would explain why Leon Flock hasn't been playing up to his standards, up to the standards that Union fans have of him. And I think a lot of credit has to be given to Leon for fighting through this injury, a difficult injury. But the injuries now become too painful. And so Jim said that Leon would fly out to Germany, get a second opinion. But odds are he's going to need surgery. He'll miss the rest of the season more than likely. And the hope is that he'll be back by playoff time. But remember, Ilsinho suffered a similar injury a couple seasons ago, I believe during his last season with the Union. And he just couldn't recover from the surgery. Took him forever to get back on the field. Was never the same. Now I get it, right? Ilsinho was around 34, 35 years old. Leon Flock's a lot younger than that. And so you would imagine his body's going to heal a lot faster than a broken down Ilsinho. But still, you just never know with these type of injuries, and especially with Leon Flock dealing with this hernia injury all season long. You don't know how bad the tear is. It could be a lot longer than what Jim Curtin's guessing. So that's definitely one to keep an eye out on. And I'm glad that Jim didn't try to get cute and play Jack Elliott as the lone 6 and play Bedoya and McGlynn as your 2 8s and continue to play in the diamond. He did the right thing and played with 3 in the back, 5 in the back when they're defending. And I think for the most part, it worked out well. Jack McGlynn in LA did a good job winning balls back in the middle, letting McGlynn set the tempo and control this game. That's something that he's really good at, letting him be that metronome, so to say. Defensively, the spacing issues that we saw during the League's Cup against Red Bulls weren't there this time around. The spacing issues we saw against Toronto weren't around this time. And I still think that's something to keep an eye on for the rest of the season, because I'm not a fool. You guys aren't fools either. This isn't the same defensive team that this team was last season. Defensively, they changed. And we talked about this a little bit on Across the Pitch, where last season might have been the best opportunity for the Union to win MLS Cup, because every single player on that team had career years. And they might not ever, some of those players, reach that high ever again. I mean, they're performing better than every statistic that was projected for them. And now they're back to being what we thought they were. Good players, but last year I would say you had some players in the squad that were playing like world-class players. And maybe world-class is too big of a word to use, but they were playing not as your typical MLS player. That's what we'll say. Yeah, world-class is probably not the word to use there. They're playing better than your typical MLS player. And now I would say they're back down to an average, a little above average MLS player. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think when people hear you talking about MLS players, people tend to get offended. It's not something you should get offended by. This league's grown tremendously. If I said that term, an MLS player 5-6 years ago, then yes, of course, that's something to get offended by. But this league's grown, so don't get offended that I'm saying, that they're playing as good as an average MLS player. Maybe a little bit above an average MLS player. But last year was something very, very special, historic. And I'm not sure these players can hit that height once again. They're definitely not doing it this season. So because of that, I feel like last year was their best opportunity to win MLS Cup. And, come playoff time, anything can happen. But happy Jim Curtin didn't get too cute with the lineup. He did exactly what needed to be done. You saw the Union score 2 set-piece goals for the first time this season in a game. 2 set-piece goals. And that puts you now at a total of 6 in MLS, which is tied for 6th most in the league with 5 other teams. And this is a team that has been dominant on set pieces since Frank Reich has taken over the last couple seasons on set pieces. Defensively, a little bit, they've been shaky. Attacking set pieces, they've been shaky. But against Red Bulls, they were excellent. And part of that is because Jim Curtin said it after his game is, the Union had a height advantage over New York Red Bulls. And so that was definitely going to be one of the keys in this game is take advantage of set piece opportunities, take advantage of your height. And the Union did just that in this game against Red Bull. Jacob Glenstis scoring off of a missed clearance, missed punch by Carlos Cornell. Nobody closes down the ball. Good strike by Glenstis. Damian Lowe with a diving header. Outmuscles Reyes. Great work balls by Kai Wagner into dangerous areas. Great fight by these players to finally put these type of plays away. And, it's interesting that the first 2 goals scored in this game tonight were by the center backs. Because there's only been 3 games this season that the Union have won where the front 3 haven't scored a goal. And so it's huge that other players stepped up, that Damian Lowe, Jacob Glesnes both scored before Carranza and Gazdag. Because we know, Jim Curtin says it all the time, this team's only going to go as far as the front 3 takes them. In only 3 games this season in MLS, when the Union have scored, there's been 3 games all season long that the front 3 hadn't scored. Against Chicago Fire, walking tours, you had an own goal against Charlotte. And then New York City, you had Martinez and Donovan. Interesting stuff there. Very interesting, I thought. So, nice to see other players step up. And yes, I know that guys like Carranza eventually did score in this game. But they weren't the players to get the Union back into this game. It was other players that stepped up, and that's huge for this team. That's huge that they can get goals from other areas. And starting at set pieces, that's going to be so critical for this team going forward. So if you guys remember last episode, I told you I would try and get an answer from Jim Curtin midweek on why he believes the Union shot on target percentage is down this year compared to the 5-year average of 37%. And this is what Jim Curtin had to say on that topic.
Yeah, I think if you look at the start of the game against Toronto, we were actually pretty sharp in the first 15 minutes in terms of being in their half, getting chances. If you look back and watch, Julian has a look where it's basically a 1v1 with the goalkeeper. Danny has a really good look in close. The ball just doesn't settle for him. Jose has a shot that should hit the target. Jack Elliott has a free header. We had about 5 corner kicks. If you score early in those types of games and have a real professional performance, the Toronto heads start to go down. But the opposite happened. We made a mistake. They punished us, and now it becomes a night where they get belief and hope, and we hurt ourselves. We did miss the target quite a bit. Our margins are tight as a team. I think I've said that a million times to you guys. When we're clinical on our transitions and we hit the target and we put the ball between the post and below the crossbar and it goes in, that's something that changes the 100 statistics that you just threw out there. So, the name of the game is scoring. It's the hardest thing to do in our game. And when we are at our best, we're putting shots on target. We're creating chaos in that red zone, getting numbers in the box, and no coincidence, good things happen when you do hit the target. You get rebounds, you get traffic in front of a goalkeeper. Even our goal is an example of that. Just by putting the ball into a dangerous area, we get a goal. So need more of that. The shots from distance, I think, need to, from 35, 40 yards out. It's cute that our fans yell every time Jacob touches the ball to shoot from 40 yards. But I think we have to have better shot selection as a team. And shoot from places that I would say suit our skill set.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the players took to heart against Red Bulls in this game on Sunday, where 10 of the Union's 11 shots were inside the 18-yard box. 55% of the shots were on target, which is exactly what the Union want to be aiming for every game. You heard Jim Curtin. Start with those shots from distance. He wants his players testing the goalkeepers more because they're likely to spill shots from inside the box and shots from distance. And then that's when you start getting the rebounds. And yes, I like the little bit of in-own by Jim Curtin when he said the 100 statistics that I gave out. I did indeed give a lot of statistics like I gave you guys last episode. And Jim's a guy, he loves stats, so he appreciates it. But it is interesting, right, that maybe at times this team is doing too much. Doing too much to have shots of desperation that they don't really need to be taking. There's games where they're not testing the goalkeeper enough. There's games where they have missed opportunity, like the game Jim Curtin's talking about against Toronto. Like the game against New York Red Bulls at Red Bull Arena back in May. Only one goal in that game, penalty kick. The Union didn't create many opportunities. They didn't test Cornell enough. And the complete opposite this Sunday. And so these players have to find a way somehow to just be more consistent. They've got to find a way to test the goalkeeper. Put more shots on target. Because if you want to critique MLS, because it's okay to critique MLS, all of us are MLS stands, but we know this isn't the best league in the world. It's not the most perfect league. defending and goalkeeping is the weak point in this league. There's nothing wrong in saying that. And so you test the goalkeeper with shots that are on target, they're more likely to spill it or not save it. And that's what this team is built for. The goal scored by Glesnes, by Damian Lowe, by Daniel Gazdag, by Julian Carranza, all inside the box. And so you hope the last 8 games of the season, the Union can continue to test. I know I've repeated myself now here for the 10th time, but continue to test the goalkeeper because they do have the players. They do have the players that can test the goalkeepers. And yes, it's great that the Union can hit on transitions. It's great that the Union can hit on set pieces. But find ways to be more consistent in those areas. And if you do that, you want to be peaking this time of the season. If the Union can continue to be consistent heading into playoffs, this team's going to be fine. And so I told you guys I'd get you guys an answer from Jim Curtin. Hopefully you guys are satisfied with that answer. And another thing I want to bring up, more stats, you guys love that, is it doesn't happen often. But it happened this Sunday. The Union conceded first at Subaru Park. Prior to this game, and only happened in 2 other games. Once against Columbus, own goal by Jacob Glesnes. Union came back and won that. And then once against Orlando City, the Union lost that game. They conceded first against New York Red Bulls. But you know what? It didn't stop this team from fighting. It didn't stop the belief in this team. That's now the 4th come-from-behind victory in MLS this season for the Union. That's the most out of all teams in MLS. And so, as fans, does that make you confident as we head towards the final stretch of the season? If the Union concede first, knowing that they have 4 come-from-behind victories in the league this season, does that make you confident that the Union can find their way back in games? And I know against Toronto, they crawled their way back in, tied the game up, and then they found a way to blow it. There's been a couple other games this season that they've done the same thing. San Jose was another one, right? They go down early in that game. Damian Lowe scores, and I believe that game went into halftime tied 1-1, if I'm not mistaken. And so this team, and I know I've repeated myself, they do have a belief in them that just because they concede first doesn't mean, all right, let's pack it up, we've lost. That's not the case. 4 come-from-behind victories this season in MLS, the most. And this is what Jim Curtin had to say after that.
Yeah, I think the culture here is strong, and that's not the coach. That's the players. You know, they hold each other accountable in training every day. They want to win all the little games that we play each and every day. So our culture here is strong. It's easy to put your head down when you concede first, but I think the crowd, stayed with us when we had a hard moment and conceded a goal. We actually were still playing well, so I think you still saw confidence, and you saw a group that was pretty relentless going forward. Did we play a perfect game? Absolutely not. We still made mistakes, and there's still things we can improve on. But that was us tonight, winning transition, scoring on restarts, being pretty sound defensively, not giving up a ton of shots on Andre. That's kind of a good Union, win that no one will remember at the end of the year, but there was some good things that happened tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of good things that the Union can build on, and you hope that they do build on. And so I do feel confident knowing that this team can play from behind, even though Jim Curtin says they're not built to play that way. But they've proved that they can play that way. And so I'm curious, how do you guys feel? Let me know on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, @FreeKickPod. Do you guys feel confident that if the Union go behind, do you feel confident that they can tie things up, eventually get the lead, and close up shop? I think it's a fair question to ask you guys. But the last thing I want to bring up on this game, and then we'll get into 3 stars and then Blunder of the week, and then call it quits on this episode, is huge news out of the locker room right after this game in regards to Kai Wagner. And I know I told you guys I would not talk about Kai Wagner's contract situation until it's official that he's gone or until the club announces they re-signed him. But I was shocked that Kai Wagner had this to say right after maybe his best ever performance for the Philadelphia Union.
Yeah, I would probably say it now. It will probably be my last year in Philadelphia now, or it will be my last year in Philadelphia. It was not my decision, but like I have to take it. But yeah, it will be my last year in Philadelphia.
Saying it will be his last year in Philadelphia. It's not his decision. Shout out to Jose Nunez for being a real one and asking that question. And, you know, Kai's been asked a couple times this season, and I feel like he's always went back and forth, and he hasn't been that blunt about it, saying, yep, this is my last season in Philadelphia. It's not my decision. What do you guys think? There's been a lot of talk, right? A lot of rumors that MLS could open up a fourth DP. The salary cap could get expanded. And we talked heavily on the Kai Wagner comments on Across the Pitch. So I don't want to spend too long talking about it here on this podcast because, again, I encourage you guys to check out that episode with myself, Dave, and Jose. But the more I think about Kai's words, and yes, he does say, it will be my last season in Philadelphia. It wasn't my decision. But that doesn't speak to me that he's all that guaranteed that he will be gone. The more I listen to it, I don't take it as, oh yeah, he's definitely gone. I know he says it will be my last year in Philadelphia. It wasn't my decision. But I think that's a tactic by Kai Wagner and his agent, trying to get more money out of the Union. I'm reading that as Kai and his agent have given an offer to the Union saying, look, this is how much we want to be paid. We'll stay, but we want to be paid this. And the Union obviously aren't meeting that salary demand by Kai. What number would you guys feel confident in keeping Kai Wagner here in Philadelphia? A lot of people I see say, oh, make Kai Wagner a fourth DP. If Julian Carranza leaves, well, that opens up a DP spot, and maybe MLS doesn't go to 4 DPs. So you feel Kai Wagner in for Julian Carranza? Maybe. But if you look at the highest paid left wing back in MLS, even though he's not classified as a defender on MLSPA, that would be Julian Gressel. He gets a guaranteed composition of $939,000. So not even $1 million yet, but close to it. A lot closer than Kai Wagner's guaranteed of $701,000. Would you feel confident paying Kai Wagner $1 million? A little bit more than $1 million, 1.2 mil. Would you feel confident if the Union did that? I think, I saw somebody say, and I talked about this one Across the Pitch. There's my 5th plug now for that podcast. If you guys can't tell by now, really want you guys to check out that podcast. I'm sure those guys will love how much I'm plugging their podcast. Somebody said to Jose that, yeah, Kai needs to fire his agent. Well, he did. He did towards the end of the season. He signed with Wasserman Agency, which is one of the biggest agencies in the world. The likes of Paxton and Brendan Aronson are with them. Weston McKinney. You have Gio Reyna with them. Matt Turner. Andre Blake's with them. And so Kai Wagner fires his old agent, signs with this mega agency that has players in all the top leagues in the world, connections everywhere. And part of me feels like, And maybe I'm off here, but part of me feels like maybe Kai and his agent have found out that interest from the top leagues really isn't there for Kai. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's from bottom of the half clubs and Kai doesn't want to play for them. And maybe Kai's come to the decision, well, it's better for me to play for a top team here in MLS than to play for a team that has a chance of getting relegated. It's possible, right? I think it's a real possibility. But it's also a real possibility that if Kai Wagner leaves on a free, he's going to be a free agent in MLS, which means he can sign with any other team. I worry about LAFC, Palacios, the left back's a free agent. I think Kai Wagner would be an upgrade there for LAFC. Cincinnati's the one that scares me the most. Barreal, their left wing back, has been linked heavily to Ajax. You imagine other top clubs in Europe are going to come for the young Argentinian. And who knows Kai Wagner as good as the Union, as well as the Union? Chris Albright, Kyle McCarthy, and Pat Noonan. His best pal, Sergio Santos, is in Cincinnati. Don't you think Sergio Santos has been putting it in Kai's ear, saying how great it is in Cincinnati? How beautiful that stadium is, how beautiful their training facilities are, how great of a coach Pat Noonan is. Don't you think Sergio Santos is saying that to Kai Wagner? I mean, how pissed as a fan base would you guys be if Kai Wagner left the Union and wind up going to Cincinnati? That's almost unforgiving, I think, for Jay Sugarman and Ernst Tanner. To see him go to Cincinnati? I mean, it's bad enough that they were trying to take Jim Curtin away, right? And people got pissed about that. But imagine if they take Kai Wagner away. I think fans don't understand how big of a loss that Chris Albright and Kyle McCarthy really were, especially Kyle McCarthy. He was supposed to be the next man up for the replacement for Chris Albright, but Chris said, I got a job promotion here for you in Cincinnati that's going to pay you more, give you a better title than what you're going to have in Philadelphia. Kyle said, all right, I'll go with you, Chris. Guy was great for the scouting of the Philadelphia Union. A really, really, really sharp soccer mind. It's a hard loss. And now Cincinnati's made him the director of soccer strategy. Union would have promoted him to technical director. But gets a huge promotion in Cincinnati, follows Chris Albright there. And you can argue the Union haven't been the same since Chris Albright and Kyle have been gone. I think that's no secret. I think the Union would admit to you that, yeah, there's a hole being felt, but they trust their guys that they have still in the building. But something's off, right? And man, you guys would lose it. You guys would absolutely lose it if Kai Wagner leaves the Union and goes to FC Cincinnati, or if he winds up going to another MLS club because the Union didn't feel comfortable paying Kai Wagner what he was asking for. So, I mean, if Kai Wagner is going to leave, you guys do hope that it's to a European club, right? I mean, it sucks that the Union aren't going to get anything for Kai. But the Union only had themselves to blame. And yeah, maybe it's true that offers never came in for Kai. Yeah, there was interest, but the Union never got an official offer. That's the reports that were out there by Tom Bogert. So I don't know. This is something that I thought was worth sharing. You guys hearing the audio, you guys make your judgment. Does it make you feel any different about Kai Wagner that he said that? Is this, in fact, a play by Kai and his agent? Or is Kai really done? What do you guys think? I mean, you can't lose a guy that has the 10th most chances created in MLS with 49. Daniel Gazag's number 16 on that list at 39. So Kai Wagner has created 10 more chances than Daniel Gazag. A left back. A left back, ladies and gentlemen. Do you realize how much production the Union get from a left back? You expect it from a 10, right? But a left back creating the 10th most chances in MLS? And yeah, maybe it's easy for the Union's front office to say, well, there's always another Kai Wagner out there. Is there? It's going to take him time to adapt to MLS, you would assume, right? Kai Wagner didn't hit the ground running as soon as he made his debut in 2019. Going to have an instant drop-off if you lose Kai Wagner. 3 assists on the night. First time in his career doing that. Actual assist, not secondary. I mean, you can't lose this guy, right? And so a lot of people are saying the Union need to do everything in their power to make sure Kai Wagner stays in Philadelphia. So we'll see what happens. At least, things are maybe going to start heating up. Maybe this is, like I said, a tactic, a play by Kai and his agent to really put the pressure on the Union's front office. Because all the front offices in MLS hear this quote. And now they're going to be talking, hey, look, we have a real chance to potentially sign Kai Wagner in the offseason. He's open to leaving Philadelphia. So we'll see what happens with that situation. But 3 stars quickly. We'll go number 3, Daniel Gazag, 1 goal. Didn't create any chances this game, but what he does off the ball defensively works his tail off. And that 1 goal that he scored, his first open play goal since May 20th against New England Revolution. Number 2 in the night, Jacob Glesnes steps up after that down night against Toronto. 1 goal, 3 shots. Could have had a hat trick. Had a free header. Had another opportunity on a set piece. But gets a goal, right? So congrats to Jacob for getting his second MLS goal this season. He had 3 blocks defensively, 2 interceptions, 3 ball recoveries. Fantastic night defensively by Jacob Glesnes. And number 1, Kai Wagner. 3 assists, 6 chances created, 10 passes into the final third, 6 out of 11 crosses complete, 1 out of 1 tackles, 1 block, 1 interception, 5 ball recoveries. How do you replace this guy? You don't. And it's interesting, right? His best game of the season. He has that quote. What a time to make a statement, right? You have a fantastic game like that, and you get asked about your contract situation. This is just more fuel for Kai and his agent to say, hey, look at this game. Look what I did. 3 chances created. Defensively, I've improved this season. And now, if Kai can heat up offensively like he did Sunday night, man, there's going to be a lot of suitors for him in MLS. But let's go ahead and talk about Blunder of the Week. And, of course, we're going to have some help from our good old pal, Jim Curtin. And, yes, Blunder of the Week could have and probably should have went to the whole Spanish Federation for the handling of now their former women's coach, where it was a toxic environment with the players and himself, where you had some players protesting not wanting to play in the World Cup to play under him. Of course, you have the whole kissing situation after Spain win the World Cup. The Spanish soccer president doesn't want to step down. So what a mess that is for the whole federation there in Spain. Toxic environment. So yeah, that probably should have been Blunder of the Week. That's on me. But my Blunder of the Week is going to go to a club that I've talked about here on the podcast before. and that is the Colorado Rapids firing head coach Robin Fraser.
Yeah, not good.
I agree, Jim. Not good. And before people correct me and say, well, look at how Colorado is doing this season in MLS. They're the worst team in the West. They're not scoring goals. They're leaking goals left and right. -23 goal differential. Only 3 wins on the season. Can't win at home. After the last couple seasons, Dick's Sporting Good Park has been a pretty difficult place to get points in. And now it's a difficult place for the Rapids to get points. And I know that the Rapids are winless in their last 17 or 18 games since May. And for sure, Robin deserves some of the blame for not trying different lineups and trying whatever he can to get the Rapids back into playoff contention. But not all of the blame can be on him. Pork Smith has got to take some blame for the way that he has constructed this roster and not setting Robin up for success. There's no secret that the Cronkies pay absolutely zero attention to the Rapids. They pour no resources into the club. Connor Ronan, Maxo, Illich are good pieces for the Rapids that they have brought in the last year. Cole Bassett, quality MLS player. But then, other than those 4 players, where's the quality in this squad? They don't have a striker. And when you don't have that, you're not going to have any success whatsoever. Darren Yappy, he looks promising, but he's young. The facilities are lackluster at best for the Rapids. And I saw a lot of mixed opinions on this, on the firing of Robin Fraser. I don't think he's totally to be blamed. And I hope that he gets another chance at a head coaching job in MLS. I mean, look what he did in 2021. Won the West with the Rapids. With a squad that wasn't great. But he got the most out of those players. And that front office has done nothing, absolutely nothing, to support Robin. They have done the bare minimum. And so as a head coach, that's difficult to work under. And so, I mean, it's hard for me to say that the reason the Rapids are playing as bad as they are this season is because of Robin. It's difficult for me to say that. I'm not totally convinced that's the case. Look at this roster, ladies and gentlemen. And I know maybe some of you guys listening are like, why do I care? I mean, I'm a Union fan. I don't care what other teams do. It doesn't involve me. But seriously, like, after you're done listening to this podcast, look at the Rapids roster and tell me how many of those players would get into the Union's team. How many of those players would be upgrades over the players that the Union have on their bench? Like, honestly, do that. Do that and let me know. I told you guys. Connor Ronan? Promising. Is maybe the only player that walks into this Union squad. And maybe not even to start. As a bench option, probably. Darren Yappy, I think the Union would probably take him as a bench option. But who else? Who else would the Union take? And so, Blunder of the Week's going to the front office of the Colorado Rapids. So, hopefully you guys enjoy that longer episode. If you guys aren't following on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow @FreeKickPod. Wherever you get your podcast, be sure to like and review. Goes a long way, ladies and gentlemen. Check out the YouTube page. youtube.com/freekickpod. Already have the goals breakdown up there from this Sunday's game. Actually released that Monday, way before I released this podcast. So I decided to prioritize that instead of the podcast, where a lot more of you guys listen to the podcast than you do watching these videos. So I encourage you guys to check out those videos. But I do appreciate the support in listening to the podcast and always giving me feedback. I appreciate the people that talked after the game, came up to me before the game started, and just, as always, just saying that they appreciate the work, and having conversations with me means more than what you guys realize, I'm pretty sure. It's awesome staying after the Union game and doing the press box, press conferences, locker room stuff, and watching the Special Olympics game. This game is a lot of fun. I just got done bashing the Rapids, but the Rapids do a really good job with their Special Olympics team, and I really, really like how the Rapids promote that, and that's like the one good thing that the Rapids get right. Well, bringing back Jordan Angeli was another good move by them, but it's tough. It's tough to be a Rapids fan. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I know I told you guys that I would try my best to have somebody from the Union on the podcast, and this is on me, so you guys can give Blunder of the Week on me. But I didn't even think, with it being an international break, pretty sure the Union gave, for sure, their players time off, and I'm pretty sure some of their coaching staff as well. So if we do get an episode, surprise. If not, then the next episode you guys are going to hear are with a special guest we have coming up on Tuesday to preview the Philadelphia Union and Cincinnati game, which nobody has messaged me who they think that is yet. So with that said, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.